So, how is it that America affords all these costly wars and all these costly bailouts? How do we afford that? Most people can't wrap their head around that. Well, and why is the middle class getting poorer? But yet at the same time we can afford to go to war, we can afford to reorganize governments overseas. We can afford to bail out financial institutions, bail out mortgage companies, and all these trillion-dollar programs. How does America afford that? So America runs on debt, and we are actually not paying up front for the wars. We're not paying up front for the bailouts. What's happening is the government borrows against the future taxpayer. And your taxes go to fund this. And so, well, then you have to ask yourself, why is the middle class struggling so much? And the short answer is because that's the way it's designed. You can't have abundance for everybody and still have the system work. The system runs on debt, and you have to have a cross between scarcity and abundance, which the people at the top have abundance and the people at the bottom have scarcity. And so because of scarcity, that keeps the system running. And that is, in a very short and sweet way, how the system keeps running. Now, this is the best system the world has ever had. People are living longer, up until recently, and people are generally better off than they were 300 years ago. But over the last, I'd say 20-25 years, we've actually gone backwards. And we've gone we've kind of devolved a little bit. Our politics are more leftist or rightist, and we are definitely more divided. And meanwhile, nobody is speaking up for the majority of Americans, and the poor, which are always targeted. They're always the first to be targeted for different crimes, different things. So the law is passed by the people in power, which that's where they get their value from. That's where they get their value, is creating things like licenses. So that gives government much more power, because then instead of, opening a barber shop, you have to apply for a license, and then that gives the government its power. That's where the value comes from. And without that, without licensure and different things, the government wouldn't have any value. And so that's where this power is that's where the value from power comes from: government authority. Now, over the past 25 years, we've seen a lot of income inequality. And the income inequality has gotten substantially worse. And the reason for that is technology. There's several factors. Politicians, the elitists, the people who run the world, the government, the most powerful government in the history of the world, the people at the who run these institutions have gotten richer. And if you go to Washington, if you go to D.C., you'll see very, very expensive homes and wealth. But as soon as you drive out of D.C., and you'll see towns without even car dealerships, So the rest of the country has gotten substantially poorer, and the elite class has gotten substantially richer, and the middle class has gotten substantially poorer. And, the middle class is the most affected by regulations, rules, laws being passed. They're the ones who really suffer because most middle class Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. A lot of them can't afford a $1,000 emergency. A lot of them have to borrow credit. So we could afford, with all the money that we spend on these wars and fixing other countries, if we just took a fifth of that money being spent overseas, and if we gave it back to the people, we could afford it easily. But why don't they do this? So why don't the people in power want to enrich people? Regular people, ordinary people. Well, because in their eyes, it would destroy the system. Okay? It would destroy their power. It would limit their power. Because if more people in America are doing well, the need for solutions coming from the elitists, from the upper class, would go away. People wouldn't need the politicians as much. People wouldn't need the lawyers. And even though America could afford it, they don't want to do that for that reason. Now, it's up to us. It's up to the majority. It's up to the poor people, the lower class, to come together. The upper class, they're good. They're good to go. They're smart. They're educated. They have institutions. They have think tanks. They have clubs, country clubs. They meet with each other. They eat and dine and drink and do all kinds of stuff together. They have all kinds of weird stuff, swinger events, where they swap each other's partners out. I've seen that firsthand from the upper class. The upper class really is perverted, if you really get into that, but that's a different topic. So, the upper class is fine. They, again, they have clubs, they have institutions, they have think tanks, they have get-togethers, they talk, they discuss. It's the poor people, the lower class, who don't discuss. And the reason they don't discuss, the reason they don't get together, is because they don't know enough. They weren't taught this. And so what's happened is the lower class are being pitted against each other. Okay? The lower middle class, it has been divided. And that's continually what's happening, is the lower class, instead of forming unions, worker unions, and demanding more pay, not through the government, but through their own organization, through unions, where they can then demand a fair wage. Instead of what it used to be, the lower class has become more divided. And has been pitted against each other. And that is a devolve. We have devolved in that manner, in that sense, because if you look back 100 years ago, if you look back to the 40s and the 50s, unions were formed and the lower class came together, regardless of race, regardless of gender, regardless of whatever their preferences were. The lower class came together and demanded more. And this has been slowly disappearing. And the reason that is I don't know. Most Americans are not smart enough, unfortunately, to understand economics. And even though the tools are more available than ever, man. So I would say that if you're making under $40,000 a year, and you are not necessarily college educated, you might be college educated but just can't find the proper employment, or you are lower class. If you're making under, I'd say, 40,000 a year, we need to come together. People who are of lower class need to come together and form unions again, demand their politicians for to allow the legislation to form unions and demand more. We are all Americans here. And what is unfortunately happening is the aristocracy is getting more and more blatant. They're getting more and more powerful, more and more enriching. They're enriching themselves, and they have more power than ever before. And we need to demand that capitalism be fixed. Capitalism needs to be fixed. Okay? Capitalism is the best way to lift people out of poverty. Free markets. But what unfortunately happens with a capitalist system over time is it becomes corrupted through corruption. So the leaders at the top of these corporations, instead of competing with each other, what they do is they meet behind closed doors and they shake their hands of their competitor, and then they set prices. And you see this a lot. You see this in the healthcare industry with drugs and different things. And the legislators will get together and give the green light for the pharmaceutical companies to sell a drug for extremely high cost to the consumer. And without the legislators, they wouldn't be able to do that. Without the legislators, the drug would never be bought for the amount, and generics would immediately be made, and so the market would compete, and so that would bring the price down. But what happens in a capitalist society, and we're only learning this recently, is that it becomes corrupted over time. And so you need a balance of socialism and capitalism in order to balance out the greed and the corruption. And unfortunately, the problem is our government is not doing their job and has been taking kickbacks and money. And this has been going on for years. And it's finally starting to have an effect. But the problem again is most people don't understand this. They don't have the time. They don't understand that if the government did its job properly, we would have some savings. You'd be able to save a little bit. Every American who worked 40, 60, 70 hours a week would be able to go on vacation once a year, would be able to afford $1,000 emergency, would be able to get a car loan for a decent interest rate. I mean, there's just so many things that if government did its job properly, that would become manageable, that would become so much easier. And instead, what's happened through television, entertainment, news, is that we've become divided. The lower class is being pitted against each other. And until we wake up and start to come together, and I'm talking about class of people, I'm not talking about races. Politics really is, right now, is top down. It's no longer left and right. Yes, we can argue about abortion. Yes, we can argue about equality and all that jazz. But at the end of the day, if people are not making a decent living, then all that crap doesn't matter. When an economy's growing and the vast majority of people, even the people in the middle and at the bottom, can live a decent life, then politics becomes much different. Less violent crime, less corruption, more sustainable families, more stable households, more stable kids. The father feels like he's worth something. The mother can stay home and raise the children. The father can be the breadwinner again and go out and earn a living. And his wife can stay home with the children without stress, without having to work a second job. And unfortunately, we've gotten used to what we've gotten used to. And there's a better way. So, and understand that in politics, Democrats and Republicans are the same. Okay? The Democrats used to be against power, the Democratic Party used to be anti-establishment. And now if you turn on MSNBC and CNN, they're close to power. They suck up to power. They love power. And they like the wars. They vouch for the wars. It's very bizarre. And this is not your traditional liberal viewpoint. This was never the traditional liberal viewpoint. The liberals used to be against war. They used to be anti-establishment, and the Republicans were the establishment. Now it's flipped. It's almost flipped. The Democratic Party, it really doesn't matter anymore because, like I said, it's no longer a left-right issue. It's a top-down issue. It's the rich against the poor. And the rich have all the power, and the poor have no power. And unfortunately, until the lower class people band together, people making under 40 grand a year, create some sort of mechanism in which they can demand a decent wage and they can demand things from their legislators, this problem's only going to get worse. The problem's only going to accelerate. And, I can go on and on. I mean, Barack Obama was for wars. He was for debt. He was very established. He sucked up to power. Same thing with Bush. Same thing with Clinton. And so it's been going on a long time. And we haven't had a true liberal Democrat in I don't know how long time. So until people realize that it's a top-down effect, that it really is about money, this problem's only going to get worse. And until the lower class people stop competing with each other and start coming together, this problem is only going to get worse. So like, comment, share. If you like my video, give it a thumbs up. If you have questions, Leave them in the comment section. If you want some feedback, let me know, and I'll get back to you. Thank you.